Black History Month. Today we're reading from this book, The People Could Fly. And in my other videos, I talk about the author Virginia Hamilton. This story is a short story. It comes from a section of the book called Carrying the Runaways and Other Slave Tales of Freedom. This was written in the 1990s. Carrying the runaways. Never had any idea of carrying the runaway slaves over the river, even though I was right there on the plantation, right by that big river. It never got in my mind to do something like that. But one day the woman whose house I had gone courting to said she knew a pretty girl wanted to cross the river and would I take her. Well, I met the girl and she was awful pretty. And soon the woman was telling me how to get across, how to go, when to leave. Well, I had to think about it. But each day, that girl or the woman would come around, ask me, would I row the girl across the river to a place called Ripley? Well, I finally said I would. And one night, I went over to the woman's house. My owner trusted me and let me come and go as I pleased. Long as I didn't try to read or write anything, for writing and reading were forbidden to slaves. Now, I had heard about the other side of the river from the other slaves, but I thought it was just like the side where we lived on the plantation. I thought there were slaves and masters over there, too, and overseers and rawhide whips they used on us. That's why I was so scared. And I thought I'd land the girl over there, and some overseers didn't know us, would beat us for being out at night. They could do that, you know. Well, I did it. Oh, it was a long rowing time in the cold with me worrying, but pretty soon I see a light way up high. Then I remembered the woman told me to watch for a light, told me to row to the light, which is what I did. And when I got to it, there were two men. They reached down and grabbed the girl. Then one of the men took me by the arm, said, "You about hungry?" And if he hadn't been holding me, I would have fell out of that rowboat. Well, that was my first trip. I was scared for a long time after that, but pretty soon I got over it as other folks asked me to take them across the river, 2 and 3 at a time. I'd take them. I got used to making 3 or 4 trips every month. Now it was funny, I never saw my passengers after that first girl because I took them on the nights when the moon was not showing, it was cloudy, and I always met them in the open or in a house with no light. So I never saw them, couldn't recognize them, and couldn't describe them. But I would say to them, "What you say?" And they would say the password. Sounded like Menair. Seemed the word came from the Bible somewhere, but I don't know. And they would have to say that word before I took them across. Well, there in Ripley was a man named Mr. Rankins. The rest was John, I think. He had a station there for escaping slaves. Ohio was a free state, I found out. So once they got across, Mr. Rankins would see to them. We went at night so we could continue back for more and to be sure no slave catchers would follow us there. Mr. Rankins had a big light about 30 feet up and it burned all night. It meant freedom for slaves if they could get to that bright flame. I worked hard and almost got caught. I've been rowing fugitives for almost 4 years. It was in 1863 and it was a night I carried 12 runaways across the river to Mr. Rankins. I stepped out of the boat back in Kentucky and they were after me. Don't know how they found out. But the slave catchers didn't know them, were on my trail. I ran away from the plantation and all who I knew there. I lived in the fields and in the woods, even in caves. Sometimes I slept up in the tree branches or in a hay pile. I couldn't get across the river now. It was watched so closely. Finally, I did get across. Late one night, me and my wife went. I had gone back to the plantation to get her. Mr. Rankins had him a bell by this time along with the light. We were rowing and rowing. We could see the light and hear that bell, but it seemed we weren't getting any closer. It took forever, it seemed. That was because We were so scared, and it was so dark, and we knew we could get caught and never get gone. Well, we did get there. We pulled up there, went on to freedom. It was only a few months before all the slaves were freed. We didn't stay on at Ripley. We went on to Detroit because I wasn't taking any chances. I have children and grandchildren now. Well, the bigger ones don't care so much to hear about those times. But the little ones, well, they never get tired of hearing how their grandpa brought emancipation to loads of slaves he could touch and feel in the dark but never see. Carrying the Runaways is a reality tale of freedom, a true slave narrative. The former slave who first told the tale is an actual person, Arnold Gadsden, a slave in Kentucky. His story of rowing runaways across the Ohio River represents thousands of such stories of escape to freedom. Now, we know about the Underground Railroad. There's been a whole movie and everything. This is written in the 90s. And it turns out the author who wrote this was related to one of the people told the story. It was her great-great-grandfather. So the first slave who told the tale is Arnold Gadsden, and here's a picture of him. And then the abolitionist who helped the runaways once they were across the river was John Rankin, a Presbyterian minister and a Southerner who lived in Ripley, Ohio. The town's still there, situated on the Great River. A rickety wood staircase leads up to Liberty Hill from Ohio River bottomlands to the underground station house of the Rankin family. From 1825 to 1865, more than 2,000 slaves were sheltered at the house and guided on by the family. Today, it's a state memorial. And here it is. Here's a picture of it. That is in Ripley, Ohio. Another fugitive, Levi Perry, which I could not find a picture of him, born a slave, crossed the Ohio River into freedom with his mother around 1854. They were rescued by John Rankin, were taken in and taken care of at the house with the light. Years later, every 6 months or so, Levi Perry would settle his 10 children around him, and he would begin. Now listen, children, I want to tell you about slavery and how my mother and I ran away from it, so you'll know and never let it happen to you. This tale was told to me recently by my mother, Etta Bell Perry, who is 92 years old and Levi Perry's oldest daughter. And that is how Virginia Hamilton was able to share the folk tales that she wrote and adapted and researched in this book. I think that it's important to tell tales. It doesn't matter how the archives are changed, and it doesn't matter if memorials are erected or not erected. What matters is the tales of all of us, and we must endeavor to take the time to learn about the cultures in the quilt of America. I spoke before on why it's important to celebrate different cultures, and America is not a melting pot like Gen X was taught. It is a quilt. It is a quilt. We are not all the same. It is the diversity, dare I say it, that makes us strong and unique as a country.